High in the storm-blown mountains of Colorado, a former Marine was only checking a lonely forest trail. But what he found in the blinding snow would change two lives forever. A luxury SUV flipped beneath the pines, a powerful CEO fighting to stay alive, and a night trapped in an abandoned cabin where the cold wasn't the only thing breaking them open. As the wind roared and the temperature fell, Ava whispered the words he never expected. "Can I slip under your blanket?" Not out of romance, but survival. What neither of them knew was that God had led them to that cabin for a reason. A broken man searching for peace, a woman crushed by the weight of success, and a loyal German shepherd who refused to leave their side. Through the storm, the fear, and the painful memories they shared in the dark, they discovered that sometimes God's miracles arrive quietly, as warmth in the cold, honesty in the silence, and healing where you least expect it. If you believe God still sends grace into the middle of our storms, don't scroll away. Hit subscribe, share, and comment Amen to spread this story of faith, hope, and redemption. May the Lord bless and protect everyone watching. The early winter in the Rocky Mountains had a way of swallowing sound, color, and warmth all at once. Silver Ridge, a small American town resting quietly at the base of the mountains, was already blanketed in heavy snow that coated rooftops, buried cars up to their wheels, and turned every breath into drifting fog. Higher up the slopes, the storm was merciless. Wind cut through the trees like sharpened steel, sending flurries of snow spiraling violently across the narrow forest road. Ethan Cole moved steadily along that road, the familiar crunch of ice under his boots drowned out by the storm's roar. At 38, Ethan carried the rugged strength of a former U.S. Marine, broad shoulders, disciplined posture, and a jawline shadowed by several days of coarse stubble. His eyes, a weathered blue, hinted at a man who had witnessed both battlefields and heartbreak. Most of the lines on his face had been carved by military life, but the deepest ones, the ones near his eyes, came from grief, from the loss of his wife 4 years earlier. Time had softened the wound, but not closed it. Beside him trotted Rex, his 5-year-old German shepherd. Rex had a strong build, thick chest, sturdy legs, sable-patterned fur that bristled under the cold, and eyes alert with intelligence. He had once served with Ethan during a deployment overseas, trained for search and protection. Though Rex had the imposing look of a working dog, his loyalty was boundless, and around Ethan he moved with quiet confidence, always slightly ahead but always aware. Ethan often checked these trails whenever storms rolled in, making sure no hikers or campers had gotten trapped. He preferred solitude, preferred the silence of the mountains to the noise of the world. But today, the silence broke. A faint metallic screech echoed between the trees. Ethan stopped. Rex's ears shot up, his posture stiffening as he scanned the road below. Then it happened, too fast and too violently. A dark SUV skidded into view on the icy lane, spinning sideways as the driver struggled desperately for control. The tires locked, the vehicle fishtailed, then jerked violently. Ethan's breath hitched. The SUV slammed through the thin guardrail and vanished down the snowy embankment, rolling into the dense white void. For one frozen second, Ethan didn't move. Memories hit him like a blow. The phone call about his wife's accident, the rain-slick road, the hours waiting in a hospital hallway praying for a miracle that never came. His heart clenched painfully, but this time he wasn't helpless. "Rex, come!" Ethan shouted, sprinting down the slope. Snow swallowed his shins as he pushed forward, slipping, stabilizing, pushing again. The storm clawed at his jacket, wind whipping sharp ice against his face. Still, he forced himself down the ridge with urgency sharpened by memory, instinct, and duty. Rex bounded ahead, powerful and sure-footed even in the deep snow. They reached the twisted SUV wedged against a fallen pine. The front hood was crumpled like paper. The windshield cracked in intricate frozen patterns. Snow poured inside through the shattered glass. Ethan yanked the driver's door. It resisted before giving way with a metallic groan. Inside was a woman, unconscious, slumped forward, her breathing faint and shaky. She appeared around 35, her features delicate beneath the pale cast of shock. Her long black hair had fallen from a sleek professional style, strands sticking to her cheeks. A thin cut traced her temple, bleeding lightly against her fair skin. Her winter coat, expensive, fur-lined, was soaked at the collar, revealing a charcoal gray business dress beneath it. Ethan recognized her instantly. Ava Reynolds, CEO of Reynolds Systems, a woman known across the country for her razor-sharp decisions, cold precision, and the kind of ambition only the business world demanded. In photographs and interviews, she always looked unshakable. Flawless posture, flawless makeup, flawless confidence. But now none of that existed. She was fragile, hurt, barely holding on. Rex whined softly, inching closer, sensing her distress. Ethan leaned inside, checking her pulse. Weak, but there. "Ma'am, can you hear me?" he asked, voice calm and steady. Ava's eyelids trembled open. Her eyes, usually steely gray, were unfocused, glassy from pain and cold. "You? Who?" she whispered, voice barely audible over the howling storm. "Ethan Cole," he answered. "You're going to be all right. I've got you." She tried to shift, but winced, clutching her ribs. Ethan quickly assessed the situation. The temperature was dropping fast. Hypothermia would set in soon. Snow was piling inside the SUV, and the wind was growing even more violent. The path back to town was far too long and dangerous in this weather, especially with her injuries. There was only one option. A small, abandoned logging cabin stood half a mile east, tucked behind a cluster of old pines. Ethan had used it once during a hiking trip with his son, Liam. If it hadn't collapsed under the winter's weight, it might be the only chance they had. He unbuckled Ava gently, making sure not to jostle her ribs. "I'm getting you out of here," Ethan said, lifting her into his arms. She felt frighteningly light, her body cold against his chest. "Stay awake if you can." Ava didn't respond, but her fingers twitched as if trying to hold on to consciousness. Rex circled them protectively as Ethan began the climb toward the cabin. The wind roared, visibility shrinking to almost nothing. Snow stung Ethan's skin, and the weight in his arms grew heavier with each step. But he didn't stop. He would not fail another person in a storm. 15 agonizing minutes later, the cabin's silhouette appeared through the blinding white. Roof sagging, logs darkened by years of weather, but still standing. Ethan pushed the door open with his shoulder, entered the dim interior, and laid Ava carefully on a pile of old quilts. She shivered weakly. Rex pressed close, offering warmth. Ethan knelt beside her, breath ragged. "You're safe now," he murmured. Outside, the storm raged on. Inside, survival had begun. The cabin groaned softly under the weight of the storm as Ethan kicked the warped door shut behind him. The interior was dim, lit only by thin strips of pale daylight slipping through cracks in the wooden walls. Dust floated in the cold air, disturbed by the sudden movement. The space was small. One room, a metal stove standing crooked in the corner, several worn quilts piled on an old cot, and a wooden table missing a leg, propped up awkwardly by a rock. It wasn't much, but it had kept Ethan and his son safe once before, and now it would have to do the same for this stranger. Ava Reynolds lay on the quilts where Ethan had set her. Her breathing was shallow, her skin still tinted blue from the cold. The expensive coat she wore was stiff with frozen snow, and her dress clung heavily to her frame. Her normally sleek, polished appearance was replaced by vulnerability, her black hair tangled, her eyelashes dusted with frost, her lips trembling in small, involuntary spasms. Even in this disheveled state, the sharp lines of her face showed the kind of woman used to control. High cheekbones, defined jawline, and a posture that, even weakened, hinted at someone accustomed to standing above chaos, not inside it. Rex circled the cot, sniffing gently before lying down near her legs, the heat from his thick sable fur radiating through the threadbare blankets. The dog's presence seemed to steady the air around her. Ethan wasted no time. He shrugged off his heavy jacket, revealing a thermal shirt that stretched over his muscular frame. His arms bore faint scars, some from combat, others from the life he'd built afterward. He tossed the jacket over Ava's torso, then knelt in front of the metal stove, examining it with the precision of someone who'd fixed 100 unreliable tools in worse conditions. The stove was rusted, its chimney pipe bent slightly, but it would still burn if coaxed. He pulled a small survival pouch from his backpack, flint, tinder, twigs he'd collected earlier, and began the practiced movements of building a fire. Sparks flew, smoke curled upward, then a weak flame flickered alive. Ethan fed it slowly until a small but steady heat filled the corner. It wasn't enough, but it was a start. Behind him, Ava stirred. Her eyelids fluttered open, gray irises dazed but searching. She blinked several times, confused by her surroundings. "Where?" Her voice was hoarse. "You're safe," Ethan said without turning yet, adjusting the stove damper. "You were in an accident. This cabin was the closest shelter." Ava tried to sit up, but exhaustion dragged her back down. "I remember the road, spinning." Her face tightened as pain shot through her ribs. "Don't move too fast. You might have bruised a rib," Ethan said, finally facing her. His expression was calm, steady, the look of a man accustomed to guiding others through fear. Ava took him in properly this time. She had only glimpsed him, in the SUV before, but now, in the dim cabin light, she could see more. The rugged edges of his face, the unshaven jaw, the blue eyes that seemed too observant for comfort, and the quiet authority in his posture. He didn't look like someone who panicked. He looked like someone who endured. Rex shifted his weight, nudging Ava's leg with his nose. She flinched a little, not expecting the warmth. "Is he yours?" "Yeah, Rex, 5 years old, trained for search and rescue, and to be stubborn when he wants to," Ethan said with a faint smile. Ava lowered her hand slowly toward the dog. Rex sniffed it, then rested his head gently against her palm. Something soft flickered in her eyes, surprise mixed with a kind of fragile gratitude. Ethan noticed. "He won't let anything happen to you," he said simply. Ava swallowed, her throat tight. "Thank you, both of you." Her voice cracked slightly, and she looked away as though ashamed of the weakness. Ethan pretended not to notice. He retrieved a canteen from his bag and knelt beside her, lifting her shoulders just enough to let her sip. She drank shakily, each swallow helping the color return to her cheeks. "You're freezing," Ethan murmured. We need to get you out of those wet clothes. I have a spare thermal shirt. Big, but warm. Ava hesitated, pride flaring briefly, the CEO in her resurfacing. Ethan saw it and added gently, "You'll get hypothermia if you stay like this." She nodded. He handed her the shirt and turned away respectfully, busying himself with rearranging the firewood. Ava struggled quietly behind him, teeth clenched against the pain in her ribs. When she was done, Ethan draped another blanket over her shoulders. Minutes passed with only the crackling fire and the muffled storm outside. Slowly, Ava's shivering eased. She looked toward Rex again. "He's really warm." "He knows when someone needs him," Ethan replied. "More than most people do." A faint exhale left Ava, half a sigh, half an incredulous laugh. The storm slammed against the cabin walls, reminding them how thin the barrier between life and cold really was. Ethan checked the door, the windows, then squatted beside the stove once more. His movements were efficient, deliberate, the result of years of training and the lifetime of a man who had learned to fix things because no one else would. Ava watched him, studying the quiet discipline he carried so naturally. "You're used to situations like this," she said softly. "A few," he answered. "Marines teach you how to stay alive. Life teaches you why you should." Their eyes met briefly before Rex nudged his head into Ethan's knee, breaking the moment. Heat finally spread through the cabin, thin but real. Ava sank back into the blankets, her breathing slowing. Rex moved closer, lying directly against her side with instinctive gentleness. Ethan sat nearby, listening to the fire pop. For the first time since the accident, Ava looked like she might actually survive the night. And survival was the only goal for now. The storm continued its relentless assault on the mountains, turning the cabin into a fragile island surrounded by a sea of white. Hours had passed since Ethan first lit the stove, and though the fire fought bravely, the cold still crept through every crack in the wooden walls. Night arrived early, smothering the world beyond the frosted window. The wind howled like a wounded creature, rattling the door, shaking the loose shingles on the roof. Survival, for now, depended on staying close to the little warmth they had. The single thick blanket Ethan found in the cabin lay folded beside Ava, who was still recovering from the shock and chill. Even bundled in Ethan's oversized thermal shirt, she shivered as icy drafts slithered along the floor. Rex had curled himself tightly at her side, offering the kind of warmth and steadiness only an animal could give. His breath rose in soft puffs, and his tail thumped lightly each time Ava's hand brushed his fur. Ethan checked the fire once more, but there was no more dry wood inside. He would gather more later, only when absolutely necessary. For now, he brought the thick blanket over to the cot. "The temperature's dropping," he said quietly. "This is all we've got." Ava nodded, her voice softer than before. "It's fine. I trust you." She didn't say it easily. She looked like someone unaccustomed to depending on anyone. Ethan unfolded the blanket and draped it over both of them as he sat on the edge of the cot. Ava scooted closer, hesitant at first, then settling against the warmth of his shoulder. Her breath trembled, but her body slowly relaxed under the shared heat. Minutes stretched into stillness. The crackling fire filled the silence until Ava finally spoke. "Do you ever feel like you're living a life someone else planned for you?" Her voice carried a muted ache, as if the question had lived in her chest for years. Ethan looked at her, sensing a weight behind the words. "Sometimes," he admitted. Ava stared at the far wall as though seeing a world far away. 8 years, she whispered. Not one day off, not one moment to breathe. She swallowed hard, her jaw tightening. My father died suddenly, heart attack. And the moment he was gone, the board expected me to step in. Expected me to be him, strong, confident, untouchable. Her voice cracked, just slightly, but enough for Ethan to see the fracture behind the famously polished exterior. I became what they needed, she continued. A CEO who never shows weakness. Someone who doesn't break, doesn't cry, doesn't slow down. Her eyes glimmered with the reflection of the firelight. I didn't realize how lonely that made me. Rex shifted, nudging her hand with gentle insistence. Ava let out an emotional breath, stroking his fur. He seems to know. Dogs always do, Ethan said softly. A long moment passed, the storm screaming outside while the truth settled between them. Ethan exhaled slowly, leaning back against the wooden wall. I know something about losing people, he began. My wife, Claire, she died in a car accident 4 years ago. Ava looked up at him, eyes softening. She was bright, Ethan continued, his voice distant with memory. Brown hair, freckles all over, laughed way too loud. She loved life more than anyone I've ever met. We had a son, Liam. He was 5 when it happened. The pain flickered through his eyes, old but never gone. I remember thinking I had to hold everything together. For him. For us. Ethan shook his head slightly. But grief, it makes you quieter. Makes you disappear into yourself. Ava whispered, How did you survive it? A day at a time, Ethan answered simply. And Liam, he pulled me out of the dark without even knowing it. He paused, tension softening in his shoulders. He's 9 now, stubborn, smart, asks questions I'm never ready for. He misses having a mom, even if he doesn't say it. Ava's gaze dropped to her hands. I envy that, having someone who pulls you through. You will, Ethan replied gently. Everyone does. Sometimes it just takes the right moment or the right person. The fire crackled again, sending warm light across their faces. The blanket became a cocoon against the cold, their shoulders brushing slightly, neither pulling away. Ava rested her head lightly against Ethan's upper arm. You make it sound so simple. It's not, he said with a faint smile. But the truth doesn't have to be complicated to be real. The storm outside screamed, but inside the cabin something softened, an invisible warmth spreading between them, quiet and honest. Not romance, not anything that demanded more than they could give. Just 2 human beings thawing, one truth at a time. Rex sighed deeply in his sleep, his body pressed close to Ava's legs, as though he'd chosen her as part of his small pack. Ethan adjusted the blanket to cover her better. Ava murmured a soft thanks, her eyes fluttering as exhaustion pulled her closer to sleep. The storm would keep them trapped for hours, maybe the whole night. But for the first time since the accident, Ava closed her eyes without fear. Inside the fragile warmth of the cabin, beneath one shared blanket, 2 very different lives slowly began to reveal themselves. Dawn crept slowly over the mountains, a pale blue light filtering through the thinning storm clouds. What had been a raging white wall of wind and ice only hours earlier now faded into a heavy, exhausted silence. Snow blanketed everything outside the cabin, thick, untouched, and glittering faintly in the early morning glow. The worst had passed. Ethan stood by the small window, his breath fogging the glass as he tested the air with a soldier's instinct. The storm had lost its edge, the wind lowered to a whisper. Somewhere far off, a bird called, a sign the mountain was alive again. Behind him, Ava shifted beneath the heavy blanket. Her hair, once damp and tangled, had dried into soft waves around her face. Her color had returned, though faint. She looked fragile, but no longer fading. Rex lay curled at her hip, tail thumping lazily when she stirred. "You're awake," Ethan said, turning toward her. Ava offered a faint smile. "I think so." Her voice was hoarse, but steadier than the night before. "Is the storm—" "Clearing," Ethan answered. "We might have a chance." He walked to his backpack, pulling out a red flare case. It was dented from years of use, the metal scratched, but the device inside remained functional. He checked the ignition cap, then slipped on his jacket. "I'm going to step out and signal," he said. "If the rescue team is anywhere nearby, they'll see it." Ava pulled the blanket closer. Though stronger now, fear flickered briefly across her eyes. "Be careful." Ethan gave a reassuring nod. "Rex, stay." The dog obeyed, though his ears twitched anxiously as Ethan opened the cabin door and stepped into the blinding snow. The cold bit at his skin instantly, but compared to last night, it felt manageable, a different world entirely. He trudged up the small rise in front of the cabin, boots sinking deep into the powder. Once at the top, he twisted the flare cap sharply. A brilliant red flame burst into the gray sky, hissing like a serpent as it carved a bright streak upward. Ethan held it high, letting the smoke rise thickly before planting the flare upright in the snow. Back inside, Ava watched him through the frosted window, her breath slowing with relief each time his silhouette cut through the cold light. Ethan returned minutes later, stomping snow off his boots. "It's done. Now we wait." The wait didn't last long. 2 hours later, distant engine noise rumbled through the forest, steady, mechanical, unmistakable. Ava inhaled sharply. Ethan moved to the door, peering out. A snowmobile emerged from behind a cluster of pines, followed by another. Bright orange jackets cut through the white, each one marked with the Silver Ridge Search and Rescue emblem. Leading them was a tall man with a thick brown beard and a lined, weather-worn face. Mark Holloway, the rescue captain. Mark was in his 50s, broad-shouldered with deep-set eyes that spoke of decades spent in harsh winters and countless emergencies. He was known in town for his unshakable calm, though tragedy years ago, the death of his younger brother in an avalanche, had left him quieter, more protective of those he saved. He approached with steady steps. "Ethan, when we saw that flare, I prayed it was you." Ethan clasped his hand firmly. "We've got one injured. Hypothermia, possible rib bruise." Mark nodded once, all business. "We'll take it from here." Inside the cabin, Ava tried to sit up as the rescuers entered. One of them, a young woman in her mid-20s with freckles and red hair peeking from under her winter hat, introduced herself softly as Clara Jennings, the team's medical technician. She had a gentle manner, her movements precise as she checked Ava's pulse and temperature. Clara's tone was warm but focused, shaped by compassion and long nights assisting in mountain rescues. "You're going to be fine," Clara said, wrapping a thermal blanket around Ava. "We'll get you to the clinic." Ava looked past Clara toward Ethan. "You're coming too, right?" He hesitated. "They'll take good care of you." But Ava shook her head, fear surfacing again, not of the cold this time, but of the sudden separation from the only anchor she had through the long night. "Please." Ethan met her gaze, understanding unspoken. "I'll follow behind." Clara and Mark helped Ava onto a rescue sled, securing her safely. Rex barked once, anxious but obedient when Ethan commanded him to stay close. As the snowmobiles roared to life, Ethan climbed into the last one, glancing toward the cabin that had held their strange, fragile night. Then he looked ahead, following the rescue team down the mountain. At the Silver Ridge Medical Station, a compact building with warm lighting and the smell of antiseptic, Ava was taken inside immediately. Ethan remained in the waiting area, Rex at his feet, unsure whether to stay or disappear quietly from her world. He didn't have to decide. Because the next morning, as sunlight melted the edge of the storm outside, Ava walked into the waiting room wearing a clinic robe and a soft, grateful expression. "You didn't leave," she said, voice thick with relief. "I wanted to make sure you were okay." Ava stepped closer. Her gray eyes held something gentler now, something real. "I wouldn't have let you disappear anyway." Her gaze shifted to Rex. "Either of you." Ethan felt something ease inside him, something he hadn't expected. Life had returned, and something new had begun. The next morning dawned clear and strikingly calm, as though the mountains themselves were catching their breath after the brutal storm. Sunlight spilled across Silver Ridge, melting the edges of snowbanks and turning the icicles hanging from the clinic roof into shimmering glass needles. The world looked renewed, reborn. For the first time since the accident, Ava stepped outside into the crisp air without feeling the cold bite instantly into her skin. Wrapped in a borrowed winter coat from the clinic, navy blue, slightly oversized, she felt lighter, though the weight of the past 24 hours still lingered in her chest. Inside the parking lot, a familiar figure stood near an old forest green pickup truck. Ethan waited with his hands tucked into his pockets, posture relaxed but alert, like a man who never quite let go of his military instincts. His rugged face softened when he saw Ava approaching. Rex sat obediently beside him, tail wagging hard enough to thump against the truck's tire. The German shepherd looked freshly brushed, his fur gleaming under the morning sun, ears perked as though sensing the moment's importance. Ava stopped a few steps away, her breath forming a faint cloud in the cold air. "You stayed," she said softly. Ethan gave a small nod. "Didn't feel right to leave without knowing how you were doing." Rex trotted forward with gentle excitement. Ava lowered to her knees, burying her fingers in the thick fur around his neck. "Hi, handsome," she whispered, her smile blooming in a way Ethan had not seen before. Unburdened, warm, almost youthful. Rex leaned into her, offering the kind of acceptance only dogs gave without condition. After a moment, Ava rose. Nervousness flickered across her expression. "Ethan." She hesitated, choosing her words carefully. "Could I meet Liam?" Ethan blinked, surprised, unsure, but not rejecting the idea. "Liam?" His voice softened instinctively when he spoke his son's name. Yeah, I think he'd like that." Ava exhaled, relief mingling with something more fragile. Hope. They drove to Ethan's home on the quieter side of Silver Ridge, where the houses were spaced far apart and backed by tall pines. The Cole house was modest, 2 stories with weather-worn siding, a porch swing swaying gently in the breeze, and a stack of chopped firewood neatly arranged by the door. It wasn't luxurious, but it radiated warmth and history. As they stepped out of the truck, the front door swung open. Liam burst out onto the porch, a lean, energetic 9-year-old with tousled chestnut hair and bright hazel eyes that danced with curiosity. His cheeks were flushed from play, and he clutched a wooden toy airplane in one hand. "Dad!" Liam called before noticing Ava. He froze, then straightened instinctively, shy at first, but not unfriendly. Is she the lady from the mountain? Ethan smiled gently. Yeah, buddy. This is Ava. She's a friend. Ava knelt to be at his level. Hi, Liam. Your dad and Rex saved my life. Her tone carried genuine respect, treating the boy not as a child, but someone who mattered. Liam's eyes widened. Rex, too? He looked down at the German shepherd now sitting proudly at his side. I knew he was a hero. Rex barked once, as if confirming the statement. Ava let out a soft laugh, and for the first time, Ethan saw how naturally she connected. No CEO mask, no corporate distance, just sincerity. Liam warmed quickly, showing her his airplane, explaining how he and Ethan built it from scrap wood. Ava listened with the kind of attention she rarely gave anyone outside her boardroom, impressed by the creativity etched into every handmade detail. Inside the house, the living room was filled with simple comforts: knitted blankets, framed photos, the faint smell of pine and coffee. Ava studied a picture of Ethan and Liam from a camping trip, both smiling, Rex muddy and happy beside them. She felt something stir inside her, something unfamiliar but beautifully quiet. Ethan watched her from the doorway, arms crossed loosely. This is our little world, he said, half apologetic, half proud. Not much, but it's home. Ava shook her head. It's more than you think. For a long moment, the three of them stood together while Rex circled lazily between them, nudging both Ava and Ethan as though reminding them that they belonged in the same space. No promises were spoken, no declarations made. But the fragile bridge forming between them, built from survival, honesty, and unexpected warmth, felt more real than anything Ava had known in years. Outside, the sun climbed higher, casting long shadows across the snow-covered yard. Ava stepped onto the porch beside Ethan, watching Liam and Rex chase each other through the soft, white drifts. Something quiet settled between them, something healing. This wasn't romance rushing in. It was possibility, a beginning gently taking root in the thawed morning light. And for the first time in a long time, Ava felt that peace didn't have to come from success or power. It could come from kindness, from a child's smile, from a dog's loyalty, from a man who expected nothing in return, a fragile bridge between two worlds, and maybe, just maybe, the first step towards something new. There are moments in life that logic cannot explain, moments untouched by power, success, or human control. Moments that feel like something greater is at work. Moments we often call miracles. Ethan was a man who had lost everything. Ava was a woman who seemed to have everything, yet lived with an empty heart. A storm that was supposed to separate lives instead became the bridge that connected two souls who had forgotten what warmth truly felt like. Some people call it coincidence. Some call it fate. But for those who believe in something higher, this feels like God's way of bringing two broken hearts toward healing. In that freezing night, it wasn't just a fire in an old cabin that came alive. It was hope, rekindled between two human beings from two different worlds. Sometimes, God sends miracles in quiet forms. A loyal dog who refuses to leave your side. A humble man with a wounded past. A child's smile that melts the coldest fears. A moment of safety in the middle of a storm. And this story reminds us of something important. No night is too long. No storm is too strong when God is still guiding your steps. Even when we cannot see the path, He is already there, preparing a place of warmth, a moment of rescue, or the right person at the exact moment you need them. If you're watching this right now, remember, God still works in quiet ways. miracles still happen. And you are never alone, not even in your darkest winter. May God bless you, protect you, and pour peace over you and your loved ones. If this story touched your heart, share this video to spread kindness and hope. Leave a comment below and tell us, do you still believe in miracles? Don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and help us bring more healing stories to the world. May God watch over every viewer and bless your journey ahead.